Hi, it's Gary Hall Sr. at the Race Club in Coronado, California, and thank you for joining us live on YouTube for our broadcast. I want to thank again all of our Race Club YouTube subscribers that have joined our membership. It keeps growing every week. We thank you for joining. If you're not sure how to do that, go to the YouTube channel for the Race Club. Look at the top of the page and just click on the join button, and you'll be one of our many members that are getting our free videos that we send out to you every couple of weeks. And we like to keep you informed. We like to keep educating you and helping you with your coaching and swimming careers. So today we have a very fascinating subject, and it's one of my favorite topics. And we've talked a lot about it in the past. I've written a lot about it in the past. We've videoed a lot about it in the past, and I still am amazed because I learn something about the dolphin kick every time I do a new study. One of the things that I've learned about the dolphin kick is that although it looks very similar for every swimmer we watch from the surface or on deck, the truth is that every single dolphin kick is done differently. And to show you that, we're going to highlight just a few of our video and velocity meter analyses of dolphin kick from some of the swimmers we've done over the past few years, just to show you the huge and big differences in their curves and in the emphasis, where they're putting the emphasis, and also how they get different acceleration points at different points in the kicking cycle. Why is this important? Well, today we refer to dolphin kick as the fifth stroke. And why do we do that? Because it's done in all four of the strokes. Even the breaststroke, we have a huge dolphin kick coming off the wall and on the start. That's extremely important in getting the acceleration, getting the speed that we want. So, and in backstroke today, in short course, the elite swimmers underwater dolphin kick more than they swim backstroke. So it's become the most important part of backstroke and fly, of course, and even freestyle. When you have a strong kick and you can use it off the walls to your advantage, it becomes hugely important in the success of the swimmer. So it behooves every coach and every athlete to learn how to improve their dolphin kicks. And we can all get better. The dolphin kick is not simple to become excellent at or to excel at. It takes years to develop, and it also requires a tremendous amount of biomechanical skill and strength and stamina. Don't forget that. You can do dolphin kick well for a short distance, but if you continue to press down and pull up and use an unrelentless motion of the dolphin kick, you're going to fatigue very quickly. And so sometimes we just see the legs, completely fatigued on the last 25 or 15 or whatever of a 100 fly or 200 fly. And as soon as the legs go and fly, which is a very kick-dependent stroke, the body begins to sink, and you all know what happens. It's not good. I remember when we coached Maggie McNeil, who was the Olympic champion from Canada, and she came down to the race club. She was 11 or 12 or 13, and actually she came down about three years in a row. And she was a good kicker, but today she's become a great kicker. And it's taken her a decade, virtually, of time to build that kick, and it's still getting better. So be patient in developing the dolphin kick, but be relentless in working on the dolphin kick. I know Eddie Reese, arguably the greatest collegiate coach of all time today, in his training, does a dolphin kick set every single day in practice. And it's proven to be very successful for him. So if you're not doing that, consider doing that. And there's a lot of different ways you can do the dolphin kick: on the stomach, side, back, vertically. But do it, and do it with fins, without fins, however it is, but work it hard. So let's now go to a study we did with elite swimmer Marcus Schlesinger. Marcus was actually swam for Israel in the Olympics, and a great swimmer, great 51 plus 100 meter flyer, strong kick, very strong upper body. But what was fascinating with Marcus is we tested his dolphin kick three different ways. First of all, we asked him to be extremely tight, in other words, to not move his hands above his head in the streamline position. And if you don't move your hands, if your hands are still, and a lot of coaches tell their swimmers to keep their hands still, it's a mistake. What that means is they're not flexing at the hip. If you flex at the hip, which you have to maximize the propulsion of your dolphin kick, then your hands are going to move. If they're locked in place in the hyperstreamline position and you're flexing and you're straightening the hip, you're going to move the hands. The hands should move about, in our opinion, 6 to 8 inches. If they're moving 10 to 12 or more, you're over-undulating, you're over-flexing the hip. And if they stay less than 6, like 1 or 2 or 3 inches or none, then you're basically kicking from the knee down. You're not using the hips and the chest to generate that propulsion and power. And that's particularly important on the powerful down kick. All right, so this first shot of Marcus as he comes in, I'll bring him into the screen, just to show his normal kick. And I want to highlight on the screen here, this is, if you look at the bottom where the yellow mark is and the orange graph denotes the acceleration. And there are 4 different points normally in the elite, at least at the elite level, where the swimmers are getting propulsion or acceleration. When they're above this white line that's down below, and in the bottom graph, that white line in the middle, you can see the 0 over on the right. That means they're not accelerating or they're not decelerating. At that point, their speed is constant. When they go above the white line, that means they're accelerating. That means the propulsion is greater than the drag force at that moment. And right here, he gets his biggest acceleration as the feet pass through his body vortex. Notice how they're turned in. They're not straight back. They're pigeon-toed in, or what we call inverted. Very flexible. And he's got a lot of surface area. He's pushing through that body vortex or slipstream almost sideways. And the more the feet turn in, the more he can generate power as he goes through the body vortex. As a result of that, his speed goes up to its peak right here of 2.17 meters per second. Over on the left on the top graph, you can see the velocity. And on the yellow line with the green graph above, you see his speed at this moment. Now he begins to decelerate, and you notice his hip flexion, we measured this, is about 25 degrees. It's not over-flexing, he's not under-flexing. The right amount of hip flexion seems to be somewhere between 20 and 35 degrees. You get over 35 or 40 degrees and you're over-flexing. If you go under 20, you're under-flexing, and that means you're not getting enough follow-through on the down kick. And that means you could have gotten more propulsion on the way down with the feet than you did. It also influences the amount of propulsion you're going to get on the subsequent up kick. So there's a good reason why we undulate and why we want to flex the hip. So from here now, Marcus begins to pull up. And notice on the bottom graph here, there's another small acceleration point on the orange graph, not as big as there was on the down kick. This is generated by him pulling the bottom of his feet. Notice the feet now are pointed straight backwards. He's using the back of his leg and the bottom of his feet, the soles of his feet, to push up through the body vortex, through the slipstream, to generate more propulsion again. Now he only really gets 2 main acceleration points. A lot of the athletes we look at get 4. And in one I'm going to show you, which is the first time in history I've seen this, the only athlete out of hundreds that I've analyzed who actually gets 5 acceleration points. That's the first time I've ever seen it, and I'll show you hers in a minute. But as he comes up, he gets another little uptick in his velocity, goes up to 1.85, and then this is where the deceleration happens. The main decelerations occur from the knee bend, and here you see him dropping down to almost 1 meter per second. So his speed drops by about 40% or so here, significantly, down to 1.12 meters per second. And then you can see the angle. We measure this with a protractor. He's about 85 degrees. In my opinion, he's overbending the knee here. And he's losing a little bit more percentage or a little bit more of his velocity than he could or should if he didn't bend quite so much. It gives him also the position of power. So now he can come down with a lot of strength. Here at the bottom, you see him peaking as his feet go through the body vortex, and he sends the velocity back up to 2.09. All right, so let's now switch and go to his next study. So I asked Marcus to, just humor me here. I know this is not your normal dolphin kick, but I want you to keep your hands as still as you can. Don't let the hands move, and try to keep him rigid in front. That means he's not lifting and lowering the chest as much, and he's keeping those hands still. Yeah, I've heard a lot of coaches advise this. It's just the wrong thing to do. So in this study, he kept a very rigid position, and I'll show you what the outcome was. And he definitely wasn't as fast as he was with his normal kicking technique. Okay, I'm going to bring him into the screen here. You'll see him come over from the right side. And the first thing is, you notice, when you look at the peak velocities above, you see they don't go as high as they did before. A couple of times he gets over 2 meters per second, but most of the time he doesn't. You see a very similar acceleration below, with the peak acceleration occurring as the feet pass through the body vortex, and the same on the way up. Again, he's not getting quite as much speed as he did before, but his hands, look at his hand motion, maybe 2 inches, maybe 3 inches of movement compared to 6 or 8 that we saw before. So his average velocity on this kick was about 0.2 meters per second. I don't remember exactly, but it's about 0.2 meters per second slower than it was with his normal technique. And the next thing we did is we went to over-undulating, which was, again, a very common problem that we see, where we asked him to flex his hip more than he normally does, and the hands should move more than the normal 6 to 8 inches. So on this last study, and on this one, you see that curve at the bottom going way, way, way down. And you can see there it's really falling below 1 meter per second. He didn't do that on the previous studies. He never went this low. So he's definitely troughing out at a much lower level. He gets the speed back up to about 1 meter per second, not as much as his normal technique, pretty similar to the rigid technique. And here you can see as he comes into the camera, way overbending the knees. Now he doesn't trough out quite as low on this one, but you'll see on the next one he does. He's really at 90 degrees here, but look at the motion of his hands. Now his hands are going down and coming way up and going way down. He's actually close to 45 degrees of hip flexion here. Now he gets hurt on the deceleration side at the end of his down kick right here, and you see him decelerating on the bottom graph because his feet are hanging. It's not the hip flexion so much that's hurting him here. It's more about those feet hanging down. And when we tested that in the keys, we found that added about 30 to 40% more drag than a toe pointed backwards. Now he gets them pointed, but it takes him forever to finally get them pointed backward. And here you see on the bottom graph a little bit of acceleration, but it's almost like too little too late. Barely an uptick in his velocity, getting up to 1.45, and there goes the knee bend again, dropping way the heck down there to 0.72 meters per second. Average speed significantly slower on this over-undulating dolphin kick. So we learned that there's a fine difference between over-undulating and under-undulating, or holding the body too rigidly. Certainly the knee bend is also a very critical part of this. I want to show you next Olympian Kelsey Worrell, because Kelsey, great kicker, but Kelsey was the one that kind of first taught me that, hey, there are 4 different points I can actually generate propulsion to accelerate and go faster. Most of the time it was like Marcus, I saw 2 points, maybe 3, but all of a sudden with Kelsey we found there were 4. And that's what made me realize that you can work every aspect of that kick, both the down kick and the up kick, and really generate a lot of propulsion. So Kelsey was an Olympian in 2016, gold medalist on the relay, great butterflyer, really strong kick. And this is Kelsey. Now, we actually moved the camera in this case, so we followed her along. But what I want to show you about Kelsey, which I really like, is you look at her maximum knee bend. It's about 60 degrees, maybe 58. We measured it over and over again. She never really gets above like 62 degrees. And as a result of that, her troughs on her knee bend right there at the above is 1.24 meters per second. That's a low trough, by the way. Now it goes a little lower sometimes and a little higher others, but she still manages to get a lot of propulsion. Notice that most of her propulsion is coming at the initiation of her down kick, not as she passes through the body vortex. So her peak acceleration comes as she comes up and then immediately pushes back against that vortex she created with her feet on the way up. She gets up to, in this particular kick, 2.22 meters per second, really fast. Now the bad part comes, and that's the foot hang. She also decelerates, drops a lot of speed, not overflexing the hip. This was measured about 22 to 23 degrees each time, which is, we think, just about right. But she does point her toes. I mean, she does allow her feet to hang here a little bit, and then she points her toes and gets the up kick going, developing an acceleration at the beginning of her up kick and again as she passes through the body vortex. Now let me show you on the bottom, and this isn't the best example, but it does show 4 different points. So if you look at the peak, I'm not catching it quite on it, but you see the peak orange occurring at the initiation of the down kick. Then right here, she's still accelerating. She's on the plus side, barely, as she passes through her body vortex. Then right here on the bottom graph, you see her catch an acceleration on the way up from the initiation of the up kick, and right there from passing through the body vortex again. If we go down just a little bit, it's a little easier to catch it on this one. So there's a peak at the initiation of the down kick. There's a peak from the passing through the body vortex. There's a peak on the initiation of the up kick. And there's a fourth peak as she passes through the body vortex. And you see that sometimes more clearly than others on every single kick she takes. So she's getting 4 different points of acceleration, 4 different points of propulsion, and she has, like everyone else, the 2 bad points of deceleration. The good news here is she doesn't decelerate as much because she doesn't bend the knees as much. She decelerates actually a little bit more on the down kick from the feet hanging than she does from the knee bend. So a very good biomechanic. Her speed was actually, I think, a little bit faster than Marcus's when we tested her full speed. She was one of the fastest kickers that we've measured. All right, so now I'm going to point to a third study we did with Olivia Jubin. Olivia is now at Columbia. Great girl, great family from the DC area. Coached Olivia from the time she was, 11, 12, 10 years old, something like that. And a really good butterfly, a very strong kick. But I want to bring her study in just to show you how different the Dolphin kick can be depending on where you put the effort. And with Olivia, when I first saw this study, I thought it was a mistake. I thought we did something really totally wrong. And then I realized that no, this is the way she's kicking. This is the emphasis she's putting. Now, so she's coming in from the left side of the screen, just so you don't get confused. And in the keys, we were filming in the opposite direction. But I want to bring your attention. Now, she gets 3 big acceleration points. And I want you to bring your attention to the top line, the top graph. There's actually 3 different peaks in her velocity. One that occurs from, if you can see on the bottom graph, she's passing through the body vortex now on the way down with her kick. Great flexibility in the ankles. She has a pretty good acceleration, accelerating at 6.82 meters per second. She gets a little uptick in her velocity. Okay, now she gets deceleration from the hip flexion. She flexes to about 35 degrees, pretty good hip flexion. And then you see her velocity come down from the foot hang, from the hip flexion. Now she starts back up. Initially, she's pointing her toes really early. That's one thing Olivia did really well, is get the toes pointed early. Now she has another uptick in her velocity, and she goes up to, and there's acceleration. This is the initiation of her up kick. She's now generating maximum force, and she goes to 1.86 meters per second. Well, she's not done yet. She keeps pressing up really hard, really drives the legs upward, harder than anyone I've ever had before. And she accelerates again as she passes through the body vortex with the bottom of her feet and the back of her leg. And she gets an acceleration, a third one, at 6.12 meters per second squared. And she ends up peaking on her up kick, not on her down kick, with a velocity of 2.12 meters per second. So this was the first swimmer that I actually see get more propulsion from her up kick than she did from her down kick. Now, Olivia's problem is, when you look at where she was, and now she loses a lot of velocity, over 50%. She drops to here. Now, why is that happening? Because she's overbending the knee. She's coming up so strong, she basically can't make a U-turn fast enough. She can't slow down or stop and get her feet going back in the other direction quick enough. So she's coming up with such speed and such force that she really decelerates a tremendous amount, loses over 50% of velocity, unacceptably high. Now, if she could turn around quicker and keep the knee from bending as much, she would have an amazing kick. She's kicking hard both directions. She just loses too much here, and you can see she's starting from 1.2. If she could drop that down to 1.3 or 4, she would be over 2 meters per second in her peak on the way up every time. If you look at her knee bend, she's kind of tilted a little bit here. You'll see, I think, on this next kick. She's also coming close to 90 degrees. She goes up over 80 degrees. It's hard to appreciate because she's kind of on her side, but really too much knee bend. So that's probably the biggest cause of deceleration in most athletes, but sometimes, like with Kelsey, we saw more deceleration at this point from the feet hanging than we did from the knee bend. Notice with Olivia how quickly she points those toes, though. She doesn't let her feet hang, and she really works that up kick. Very strong legs. All right. So the last one I want to show you is a high school girl. Also, this was when Olivia was in high school, by the way. I forget. I think she was maybe a sophomore or junior. But the last study we did just recently with a girl who's also from the DC area, that's where Olivia was from. And this girl is a very talented swimmer. But I want to point out a couple things that we'd never seen before. Every time I do one of these studies, it's like, wow, I've never seen that before. Every single time. It's just fascinating. And we see so much difference in what seems to be a pretty similar biomechanical motion. But when you look at things under a microscope, you really see them very differently. So this was Alexa Fulton. Alexa, a really talented swimmer from the DC area. She doesn't really, I think, come down enough. She doesn't flex enough. And you can look at her hand motion, maybe 3 inches, not enough flexion. Also, notice that her feet separate, and she didn't know she was doing this. I don't think she's been disqualified. She may have, but this is definitely illegal. It's very hard to see this from the deck, even though that looked really, really separated, and it is. The problem with this, she's doing a really great motion with her left leg, and her right leg, her foot is hanging. So the deceleration is mostly coming from her right foot, not her left foot. And they're different, and they can't separate. How do you solve this? Well, I usually have them put a rubber band on the big toes and just tie them together and kick with that. But you notice she does it every single time. She comes down, she follows through more with the right foot, starts lifting earlier with the left foot, and that right foot hanging is really like throwing a parachute out, and she loses a lot of speed from that. But now I want to bring your attention to the bottom curve, because I've never seen anyone who got 5 acceleration points. All right, so there's acceleration point number 1, starting at the top. You see the orange curve at the bottom where she's actually generating propulsion from the initiation of her down kick. She overbends her knees, by the way. She underflexes the hip, but overbends the knees. So that's 1 point. Now there's the big one that comes through the body vortex, very similar to I think what Marcus was getting when he presses down through the body vortex. Now she gets the deceleration. This is from mostly the feet hanging here. And then she starts back up. Now she gets 1 point here at the initiation of her up kick. Then she gets a big, and again, looking at the bottom graph, it gets a big acceleration as she passes through the body vortex. This is the one that threw me. I've never seen this before. She actually gets a third acceleration point, which pushes her velocity up again for the fifth generated propulsion in a single stroke cycle. I've never seen that. Beautiful. But we've got to fix two problems. One, the knee bend. Three problems, actually. Two, the hip flexion's got to come down more. And three, the feet separating. Once we do that, Alexa's going to be awesome. So anyway, those are just three different examples of dolphin kick and what we see. And what we're looking for is to try to, there's always compromise between the propulsion and the drag forces, and dolphin kick is no exception. So there's a right amount of knee bend. If you overdo that, you may get more acceleration on the way down, but you just paid a huge penalty by decelerating on the way up. Same with the foot drop. The foot drop pretty much across the board is a bad mechanic, and I see some people that get their toe pointed much earlier than others. If you leave that foot hanging for very long, it's just going to throw a parachute out and stop you and slow you down. So, and then the amount of hip flexion we like to see somewhere between 20 and 35 degrees of hip flexion. Knee bend, I like to see anywhere between 55 and 75 degrees. When you get over 75, it seems more harm is done than good. Now, why do people bend their knees? The majority bend their knees way more than 55 or 60 or 65 or 70. They're usually in the 80 to 90 range. And the reason they're doing that is they do not have enough plantar flexibility in their ankles. And if you don't have that plantar flexibility in your ankles, you have to bend the knee in order to get more surface area. It's just essential. And so you're kind of stuck. If you try to not bend the knee as much, you don't get enough propulsion. And if you overbend the knee to get the propulsion, you slow down too much. So what's the answer? Get more flexibility, plantar flexibility in your ankles. So we had not long ago, came out with this video release. I'm going to just show you some clips from it. This was a master swimmer. He was actually a new swimmer. He didn't have much ankle flexibility. Hadn't swum for very long. So I was trying to teach him how to take a shortcut, how to get this flexibility a little bit faster. So what we first do is what we ask you to do is do what's called a freestyle squat position. That's where you're sitting on your heels, your feet are turned in, you're sitting on the tops of your feet, and then we ask you to lift your knees up off the ground. Now, if you don't have much flexibility like Mark didn't, you have to support yourself with your hands. He wasn't able to do this or very long, if he did it at all, without his hands supporting him. Ideally, we want to get him to the point where his hands are in his lap and all of the force, all the weight is on the tops of the ankles and the front part of the ankle. That's a great static stretch for plantar flexibility. How long do you hold that stretch? We like to do 2 minutes. 2 minutes may be too long for you if you're just starting out. You may do 30 seconds or a minute, whatever you can handle. But try to go to 2 minutes and do that every day. And you'll see those ankles become flexible much sooner. And then after the 2 minutes, you get up, you walk it off, you walk like an old man for about a minute or two until your ankles kind of get reacclimated. And then you get back into this position into what we call the freestyle, to do what's called a freestyle squat push-up. And this is what Mark is doing now. Now notice that he's got his hands somewhere in front of his knees, and the closer you get your hands to the knees, the harder it becomes. Notice that he's straightening his legs, and yet he's not flipping his feet over to go onto his toes. He's staying on the tops of his feet, and he's putting that pressure on the ankles by doing this. He's pigeon-toed in, he's not straight back. Hands are probably 1.5 feet in front of his knees because he's not very flexible. He can't do this unless he puts those hands well out. And that last little push, when he pushes his bum way up high, and he's still on his tops of his feet, not rolling over to be on his toes, really gets the stretch on the ankles. And so we have Mark do this 20 times after 2 minutes, and we have him do what I call the 2 and 20 every single day. And if you do that, you'll find you'll get that plantar flexibility pretty quickly. Where do we like to see your knees in a freestyle squat position? Well, the elite swimmers have their knees about 50 to 60, sometimes 70 degrees up in the air. Those that have no plantar flexibility can't get their knees off the ground, or barely can get them on. You couldn't get a piece of paper underneath their knee. So by doing this daily, you can actually increase the amount of angle that you get, or the plantar flexibility of the ankle daily. And I've seen some athletes in a week go from 20 degrees to 45 degrees with their knees up in the air. So the ligaments are small, they're stretchable, and you just have to stretch them. And it's not something you're going to use in any other sport other than swimming. But it is so important in freestyle and backstroke and butterfly to have that dolphin kick and the freestyle kick and backstroke kick speed. So that's it. We hope you enjoyed the show. We'll look forward to taking some questions, and hope you'll catch us in 2 weeks for another one of our great shows. Thank you. Okay, let's open it up for questions. I hope that that was helpful. I hope that you learned a little bit more about dolphin kick, because I'm learning something about dolphin kick every time we do a new study, and it's really an important part of swimming, and important that you learn it early on. Before I get into the questions, though, I just want to give a shout out to all our veterans. This is Veterans Day, and I just want to say how grateful we are in this country for our veterans who have made this country and given us our freedom, and really enabled us to build the greatest country in the world here. Not a perfect country, but we're always striving to get better. Also want to give a shout out to my nephew who was killed in Iraq in 2016. He was an awesome Navy SEAL, head of his platoon, and killed in Iraq during an ISIS battle. He's still my hero, and if you ever want to help Navy SEALs, probably, in my opinion, the most valiant and well-trained of all of our servicemen and women, you can go to c4foundation.org. That's letter C, number 4, foundation.org, and check out his website. There's an amazing 11-minute video on the home page that shows a short summary of Charlie's life, who unfortunately lost it way too early. All right, so let's go back and let's look at some questions. And first one comes from Red Bala. Remember, if you're a race club member, if you're a member of the elite team on the YouTube channel, we will take your questions very early. So I want to take this one because this has been up for a while, and I want to get to it. Red Ball asks, how fast should you go for a 25-meter streamline dolphin kick for time? And first of all, we always time it underwater. And what we're usually doing when we time the 25 dolphin kick is comparing it to a 25 freestyle all-out speed with no breath. And the reason we do that comparison, it's a great test, is to determine how many dolphin kicks should be taken on the start and on the turn. It's different for each, because you're going to take more on the start than you are on the turn. Or should you be taking any dolphin kicks at all? So we have a nomogram we use for this, and the way it works is very simply, you take your dolphin kick time for 25 meters or yards, then you take your freestyle time. Now, some of the elite swimmers we've tested are actually faster doing an underwater dolphin kick than they are on the surface swimming freestyle all out. Usually the time is very close, but sometimes they're actually faster dolphin kicking, not very often. But if you're between 0 and 1 seconds, we feel it's important that you stay down as long as you're aerobically capable of staying down to the legal limit or maximum of 15 meters. Why? Well, it turns out you actually use a lot less energy kicking, dolphin kicking, than you do swimming. And when you're doing a sprint, particularly, you're not going to be breathing even when you're sprinting, so you might as well go underwater, use less energy, and then break out and take fewer swimming strokes. If you're between 1 and 2 seconds, then we recommend if you're close to 2 seconds, we recommend 4 kicks on the dive and 3 kicks off the wall. If you're closer to 1 second, we add 1 to that. So you can go 5 kicks on the start, 4 kicks on the wall. Now, what if you're over 2 seconds, which is where most swimmers are? Well, if you're over 2 seconds, take the minimal amount of kicks you can, because there's so much difference in your speed between your freestyle and your dolphin kick that you really don't have any business being underwater kicking. So you should get up on the surface, swim as soon as you can. And that's 3 kicks on a start and 2 kicks on a turn. That's kind of the minimal needed to get back to the surface. We also sometimes find the difference in time, especially with the master swimmers when they have them, or triathletes, or beginner swimmers, that they're 4 or 5 seconds or more difference in time. If that's the case, there's an argument to be made, which is probably a good one, that you shouldn't take any dolphin kicks at all. You just get in and you flutter kick to the surface, freestyle kick to the surface, and get going. And the reason is the dolphin kick is going to incorporate more knee bend, and it's going to cause you to slow down more and actually do more harm than freestyle kicking. My son Gary, who swam in the Olympics in 1996, didn't do a dolphin kick to break out. He did incorporate it in 2000, 2004, but in 96 he just flutter kicked to the surface and was still pretty fast because he was a fast flutter kicker. And then if you want to know what the difference is for dolphin kick on butterfly events, you add one more kick. This is a rough approximation. You add one more kick for butterfly to whatever you do on the freestyle, and then you add one more for 2 more for backstroke to whatever you do in freestyle. So those are good ways to come up with the number of dolphin kicks that we think you should be taking off starts and turns. Now, what's a good time? Well, the faster you kick, the better. So just keep working on it, but don't just work on the kicking. Work on the flexibility like we showed you with those 2 stretches that Mark did on the video, and work on your strength. You have to do a lot of kicking to build that strength and stamina. All right, let's take next question from IK, who's one of our elite members. IK, nice to have you on the show. Recommended tempo trainer setting on mode 3, which is stroke rate mode, for dolphin kick. I usually don't use it on dolphin kick, although it's not a bad idea to use it on dolphin kick. When you're sprinting butterfly, and a good example, Sarah Sjostrom in 2014 or 15, when she went 24.4 for 15-meter butterfly, no breath, by the way. Her stroke was 62 all the way down there. So one way to do it is you could set it. I mean, she's getting 2 down kicks for every stroke cycle she's taking. 2 down kicks and 2 up kicks. There's 4 kicks to a single cycle in butterfly. It's a trick question I always use. How many kicks do you get in a single butterfly cycle? Everybody says 2. No, it's 4. 2 down, 2 up. Don't forget Olivia Jubin on that VM and how much power you can generate on the up kick if you want to, or if you try. Anyway, IK, try to set it at 120 or 125 and see if they can keep, with that. That's a fast tempo. But if they can stay with that, sometimes you solve the problem of them over-undulating when you do that. Because if they're over-undulating or flexing, they're not going to get to that stroke rate. And you want to be tight. You have to get enough propulsion, but you don't want to overdo it. So the tempo trainer isn't a bad idea to use on dolphin kick. We use it on breaststroke kick a lot, but I don't usually use it on dolphin kick. Maybe I'll change my ways. Okay, great suggestion. I'll start using it. Another question. This one is from Vladimir Samashko. When did kids start learning underwater dolphin kick? And when do they start getting results? Well, as soon as you throw them in the water and start joining the team. If they're going to do competitive swimming, they should learn to do dolphin kick from the get-go. There's no reason to delay learning the dolphin kick. There's no reason to delay doing the flexibility stretches. There's no reason to delay training the legs for fast kicking, and that means probably more kicking than they're used to doing. In my opinion, most coaches undertrain the legs. And I always go back to this comparison, but if you're swimming 100 freestyle around 100 stroke rate, which is pretty typical, maybe a little over, we'll just say it's 100 stroke rate, your kicking stroke rate is actually 600 kicks per minute. So you're doing 600 kicks for 100 arm pulls. Now, which needs to be in better shape? And there's no real recovery time for the legs. When you're sprinting or you're going 100 all out, those legs are moving down and pulling up as hard as they can, or pretty close to as hard as they can. So those legs really have to be fitter in the arms. In a 50, it's even faster than that, where the stroke rates are 120. You're talking about a 700 or 800 stroke rate for the kick. So it's like a hummingbird wing. You got to be moving all the time. It takes tremendous fitness to do that. Why are the legs the first thing to go in a race? Because they're not fit enough. They're not trained enough. All right, so Vladimir, start them early. As soon as they start using the Dolphin kick and start teaching them how to do it. One thing I want to mention is if you want to evaluate your swimmer's Dolphin kicks, the best way to do that is have them kick on their side toward you. So go to the other end, do a 25 underwater, and then look at two things. Well, three actually. One is, where is the foot coming in relationship to the slipstream, the body line? How far does that foot come out? That's a rough calculation of how much knee bend they have. You can also video them and get them, take the video and get a protractor on an app, and you can put it on your computer screen, measure it that way. But you can get a pretty good estimation eyeballing it when they come toward you on their side. You can also see the hands moving from side to side. Is it 6 inches? Is it 12 inches? Or is it 2 inches? And if it's 2, make it more. If it's 12, make it less. That's a good way to really calculate the hip flexion. So now there's two ways you can look at, and you have to look at two different swims almost to catch them both, or two different kicks. But you can measure the hip flexion, you can measure the knee bend. You can also, if the hip flexion, kind of eyeball and see if the feet are hanging down or not. In this case, they're turning to the side. So I can get a pretty good idea of the mechanics of their Dolphin kick by watching them come toward me on their side underwater, and that's a good way to teach it. All right, what's the ideal depth to start your underwater work? You don't want to be just under the surface. You actually want to be about a foot under the surface or more. You actually get a little bit of drag from the surface when you're really close to it. So there is a little bit of surface drag or wave drag caused when your body is barely under the water. Now, when you're swimming breaststroke or freestyle, you don't have time to go very deep. So you just get under the water, let the wave come over the top, and that's as good as you can get. But if you're kicking, Dolphin kick, you can actually kick a little bit faster by going a foot or more underwater. And also, if you're taking 15 kicks to breakout, you can't come straight off the wall. You notice like Phelps will go down and come back up because he's got his air in his lungs, and he's trying to hold that air in his lungs. And if he comes straight off the wall, by the time he takes his 7 or 8 kicks to breakout, he's going to be back to the surface. So he actually has to make a slight curve to come back. All right, let's take another question or two here. Some tips for a stronger Dolphin kick on breaststroke pull down. On that pull down, you really have to use your chest. It's a little bit different on that one kick. Remember, this is a one kick. What you don't want to do is you don't want to overbend that knee on that kick. So you really have to utilize your chest, lift it, and then come down hard, and then press down hard. At the end of that kick, don't let those feet hang. Because remember, you're going right into a glide. And the Dolphin kick kind of straightens you out. You want to start downhill on your first push off the wall. When you Dolphin kick, you straighten yourself out. On your pull down, you actually start to rise. So you make this kind of U shape as you come up. Again, same purpose of going down is to avoid hitting the surface too early on your breakout. All right, let's take another question. Here's one from Makoka Timothy. How do you train for underwater for 200? Well, first of all, analyze how many Dolphin kicks you should be taking off the walls on your turn. And if it's 2, then that's what you want to train. If it's more than 2, if you're fast enough with your kick to stay down longer, then you have to be aerobically fit enough to do that. In other words, you have to train by staying down longer with that kick in practice. There's some great 200 swimmers like Tonley Haas who only takes 2 kicks and he's up, and then you have 200 swimmers short course like Phelps who stayed down for almost a full 15 meters on every single 25, less so at the end. But the point being, it depends on your aerobic capacity and your Dolphin kick speed. But if Phelps didn't get that by just dreaming about it, he trained that way, coming when he was tired, staying down underwater, and really sprinting off the wall with an all-out kick. All right, let's take a couple other. GK, friend is a Lane 4 member. He's up in Toronto. Any guidance can you share when to start the dolphin kick out of the wall and off the start? It's a great question, and it's one that I think that coaches, swimmers often have a misunderstanding about, and I did as well years ago, and that is that you should take a short glide before you initiate your first dolphin kick, either on a start or on a turn. Let's start with the turn, because that one I'm absolutely sure of. And that one, we tested this with 4 elite swimmers. We actually just tested a 5th, so I haven't seen the results of that yet. But we found the same results in all 4 of them. And that is, if you take a short glide, your time to 5 meters is 0.1 seconds slower than if you take no glide at all. If you take a long glide, you're about 0.2 seconds slower to 5 meters than if you take no glide at all. What do you mean no glide at all? That means when your toes leave the wall, you immediately start that up kick and the weak side. Always starting in the weak side first, because you can't do a down kick until you bend those knees. So the first motion is pushing against the vortex that's falling you off the wall with that up kick. And then not a big undulating kick, but a tight kick going right into the down kick, and then right back up into another up kick. In other words, keeping the kick tight and keeping it fast. On a start, I used to say, well, you come down and you follow through those feet, and then you come back with an up kick right away. You don't want to let the feet hang. You want to go down, come back up, and then go right into, again, a not very knee bendy first down kick. It's actually your second down kick, because your first down kick is when the feet enter the water on the way through and press down. But then I watched Caleb in the Olympics and realized he doesn't do that. He doesn't follow through. He comes in and holds the legs tight, and then he goes into an up kick and then into his next down kick. So on the start, and I haven't measured Caleb, I would like to test those 2 starts with him. One where he follows through, and the second where he holds his legs straight. I'm not convinced he's better off doing that, but that's what he does. Is that the reason why he's so far ahead of everybody? I don't think so. It's his propulsion off the block and his amazing dolphin kick speed that enables him to get ahead. He also has an unusual and earlier breakout technique than anyone I've ever seen. All right, we'll take some more questions. Got a lot of questions here today. During training hundreds, how many dolphin kicks should I be taking to improve my race dolphin kick endurance? Again, go by the nomogram. Test yourself. 25 dolphin kick, 25 all-out sprint, freestyle, no breath. Take the time difference. Have somebody time you. Don't just look at a pace clock, because you'll never get an accurate enough time. Well, maybe if you're more than 3 seconds, you probably will. But if you're under 2 seconds, you need to have somebody with a stopwatch measuring you. So get that. That'll determine how many kicks you should take off the wall and on your start, and then practice it that way. Don't take 5 kicks when you should be taking 2. Don't take 2 kicks when you should be taking 5. You got to figure out what is right for you based on that speed, and then practice. Tips on making ankles more flexible. Well, I showed you 2 of the most probably significant stretches that I recommend. Now, I will say this, that if you're a master swimmer, you won't be able to do that. What Mark was doing, Mark is 36 years old or something, 37 years old, the guy in the video. And most master swimmers, if they try to sit on the tops of their knees probably won't allow them to do it, but if they do it, it's very painful in that position. So another way for masters to do is just put your feet under a couch, with a low lip, not a couch that's this far off the ground, but one that has a fairly low to the ground, space, maybe 6 inches or something like that. And then put your feet under there, bend your knees, and then straighten your knees as you lay back. And you actually really stretch the ankles a lot by doing that. It can be also very difficult to do, but you can gradually straighten your legs so you know when to stop. And some won't be able to straighten them all the way. That's another way of doing it, which we find is helpful for the master swimmers. All right, let's take another question or 2. Why does plantar flexion increase the surface area? Your foot isn't that big compared to your leg. Well, if you chopped your feet off and you tried to kick, you probably wouldn't go very far at all. First of all, when you look at the propulsion happening and you look at the leg, the shape of the leg, you're trying to generate a lot of turbulence or drag with the foot or the leg to generate that propulsion. And if you look at the foot as it comes down, it's going to turn where the force of the water pressing in is going to make it go. Now, if you're very flexible, then it turns a lot. If it's turning inward this way, the slipstream is a stream of water following you, so it's going linearly in your direction. As your foot comes down, if it turns in, it's traversing that stream sideways, more sideways through the stream. And that generates more propulsion than if your feet are straight back, like a ballerina. Those that don't have the ability to turn in, their feet are straight back, they may have big feet, but they don't get as much propulsion because they don't have the right angle of their foot going down. How do I know that? Well, I have a lot of that flexibility. I was a good kicker in my day. I could kick under a minute back in the 70s for a 100-yard Dolphin kick. And that's still pretty good even today. But I had a lot of flexibility in my ankle. If I point my toes backward and I try to press down hard with my foot going on the down kick, I lose a lot of propulsion. Don't go as fast. So I've tested it both ways, way faster when you allow the foot to turn in. Not so on the up kick. On the up kick, the foot is pointed back. You're getting the bottom of the sole of the foot, the bottom of the foot and the back of the leg coming up with a straight line. There's no bend in the knee. It's a straight leg motion. That's what generates the propulsion on the up kick. You could be like Olivia and really push that. I've had others similar to her, not many. Or you can just float up and snap down. Float up and snap down. But if you do that, I guarantee you're going to get beat by somebody who's working that kick in both directions. All right, the arm pulls a lot of water directly back. How can the underwaters compare? Most of the water is directed down. Again, a great question. This is Eliza Smith, and it's very important to understand that the flow dynamics for the pull, the way propulsion is generated from the pull, which is mostly in the hand, not the forearm, contrary to popular belief. It's the hand that probably generates 90% of the pulling force, propulsion. And in the leg, the difference is in front of you, where the hand is entering, the water is still, it's not moving. So you're basically, in order to generate propulsion from a pull, that hand has to be moving backward. Doesn't move backward, you're not going forward. But with a kick, it's different because your kick is moving through a stream of water that you created with your body moving, and then a second stream you create with your foot moving. If you look at the motion of the foot, and I can show you on our videos, we have a great video that we did early on with Lucas Spinazzola, where we mapped the pathway of his foot. And it goes down and forward and straight up and forward and straight down. Almost in no time does it move backward. And if it does, it's for a millisecond and not very far. And yet we still know that you generate propulsion. How can you do that without moving backward? It's because the stream is moving forward. So the foot is able to generate, and the leg is able to generate propulsion from the kick by virtue of the stream that's generated behind the swimmer, or the slipstream. Very different flow dynamic, but we have to take advantage of those vortices. There's two of them, the body vortex and the foot vortex. The foot moving down causes one vortex, the foot moving up causes another vortex. And we play off of those vortices, and that's where we get the 4, or as in Alexa, 5 different acceleration points using those vortices. All right, let's go down to, can you scroll down for me? I can't, I'm running out of room here. I don't know, is there another question? Looks like we're...
Yes, and so there's, how does progress in backstroke influence freestyle?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
I think how does getting better in backstroke help freestyle?
Well, the mechanics of backstroke, the biomechanics of backstroke are slightly different than freestyle, but they're very similar. I've always felt that if you're good in freestyle, you should be also good in backstroke. Many swimmers aren't. And it's not because the biomechanics are similar, it's just they don't apply them equally well in both strokes. So personally, I like teaching. There is a difference on the kick, since we're talking about the kicking. When you kick on your back, whether it's dolphin kick or flutter kick, you get much more propulsion on the weak side, which is now the down kick. And so we find that emphasizing the weak side when you're on your dolphin kick on your back is really important to do. Why is it different? Well, as you come up with the feet, the vortex you create creates a mushroom effect from gravity of the vortex. So it hangs around longer and gives you more surface or flow of water to push down against with the bottom of your feet. When you're pushing down hard when you're on your stomach and that big vortex is going down, gravity just keeps taking it down. So it's very hard to catch it again on the way up. But on the way down, if you pull it up, it hangs around longer, and you can really get a lot of force, sometimes more propulsion on the down kick on your back than you get from the strong up kick. It's very interesting. All right, let's take another couple of questions, and then we'll have to wrap it up here. Let's look at, my elbow's been 110 degrees. How far out should my elbow be? Are we talking about freestyle backstroke? I don't know what stroke we're talking about, but in general, in backstroke, we like the elbows to reach a point of somewhere between 100 and maybe 140 degrees, in that range. The ideal is going to be a little different for each swimmer. If you get too close, if you bend the elbow too much in backstroke, then you lose too much propulsion. If you go too far out, you get too much drag. Am I a fan of above the water straight arm sprint, or should you bend your arm a bit? I am a fan of high octane, which I call high octane straight arm freestyle recovery, for reasons that we explain in our aqua notes, and we have written many articles about that. Most of the elite swimmers you see today, particularly on the men's side, are either straight arm or they're very close to straight arm on the recovery. And there's a very good physics reason for doing that. I'm not going to go into it now. I was really talking about kicking, and we have to wrap it up. Is there a different split for the last 45 meters of a lane depending on if you start kicking as early as possible off the wall? Is there a difference in the split for the last 45 meters? Well, I'm not going to lie to you, and it takes more work and energy to start kicking right away than it does to glide. And when you're doing a 1500 or a 400 meter freestyle, you're not going to start kicking right off the wall. You need that little moment of rest coming off the wall and a little bit of glide. So you never see a 1500 swimmer doing that. But when you go to the 200 and down, that's where you should start that up kick immediately. Last question, then I think we'll wrap it up. What causes the feeling of needing to breathe again immediately after taking a breath? Well, you shouldn't right after you immediately take a breath, but what causes the urge to breathe again is the buildup of carbon dioxide in your blood, in your system. And what eliminates the carbon dioxide is exhaling. So when you exhale and you get rid of CO2, you don't have that urgent need to breathe again. But the CO2 builds up very quickly. And when it builds up to a certain level, your brain says, take a breath. When you're sprinting, you have to overcome that urgency. You have to be able to and train to be able to not breathe, even though your mind is telling you to breathe. So, all right, I think that's enough punishment for one day. Thank you all for being with me and for asking such great questions today. Just a reminder, in 2 weeks, Thomas and I are going to be down in Florida for our last camp down there at Thanksgiving. So we will not have a show during the Thanksgiving week, but we will resume the week after Thanksgiving. Don't know yet what we're going to suggest. If you have any ideas for topics or what you'd like to see us talk about, let us know. Until then, have a great week, have a great Thanksgiving, and happy Veterans Day. And thank you to all our veterans again who have made this country possible. Bye.